Canadian 262 Heavy, wind calm, runway 31 left, clear for takeoff, caution wake turbulence, previous departure Heavy 777.
The plane that every boy wants to fly is the fighter. The glory, the risk, the speed, it's all sewn up in the word. In World War I, they were considered knights of the sky, jousting across the heavens, still governed by a code of honor. Today, they are near machine-like. A blip on a radar, a tone lock, the rush of a missile. These define the fighter pilot today. But there is still danger and the rush of living life on the cutting edge. The Fokker DR-1 was a plane of the Red Baron. Designed in response to the Sopwith triplane, the DR-1 originally suffered from in-flight wing failure before going on to being one of the top planes of the Great War. The SE-5 was considered by many to be better than the Sopwith Camel, but a shortage of the Hispano-Suiza engines meant the Camel was more prevalent over the trenches. However, together with the Camel, the SE-5A achieved aerial superiority for the Allies and guaranteed there would not be another Bloody May, where vast numbers of Allied pilots were shot down by Germans. Pilots in World War I had to deal with bulky aircraft, the danger of the fabric wings ripping off, and unreliable engines, sometimes spewing out castor oil into their face. But their aerial duels are lionized as they dance across the skies in their fabric flying machines. Between the war, planes continued to evolve. The Tiger Moth was designed as a training plane to introduce flyers to aviation. It was a highly stable aircraft and is still much loved in the civilian community. Many of the planes were released to the civilian market, used in many roles, including crop dusting and barnstorming. The Boeing P-12 was among the last of the biplane fighters the U.S. bought. It bridged the gap between the faster, stress-skin monoplanes and aircraft left over from World War I. It is less well known, but nonetheless, it shows the evolution of the fighter aircraft. And it served its role well. Much like the P-12, the Dewotined D-501 was an evolution. The fixed landing gear is reminiscent of the earlier aircraft, but the monoplane design shows the fighter is beginning to take on the sleek look that is so familiar to so many who dream of fighters. Not the prettiest fighter, with a very barrel-like shape, the Brewster Buffalo was panned by many air forces, but found a glorious home with the Finnish Air Force, who used it to great effect against the Soviets. While the plane shows a further evolution with retractable landing gear, it missed the mark of maneuverability and performance for many air forces, such as the United States Army Air Corps and the Royal Air Force. However, with a 32-to-1 kill ratio by the Finnish Air Force, it shows that even an aircraft that some consider to be bad, when in the right hands, can be oh so good. Kawasaki Ki-27 went the opposite direction of the Buffalo. While the Buffalo was armored, but incapable of tight turning, twisting dogfights, the Ki-27 chose to go without that weight of armor and instead focus on the tight turning. It held air superiority over China until the arrival of newer, more powerful aircraft drove it from the skies. With the P-40 Warhawk, we start to see the lines we associate with fighters of World War II. The P-40 was a heavily armed and armored slugger of an aircraft. Couldn't dance with the Japanese Zero, but it could absorb much more damage and dish out a blistering amount of fire from its 6 50 caliber guns. Lacking a 2-stage turbo, it couldn't compete at high altitude, but Axis flyers gained a healthy respect for its ability to dish out large amounts of damage. Luftwaffe pilots quickly learned never perform a head-on attack on a P-40 with their Bf-109. The Bf-109 was the mainline fighter of Germany throughout the war. It was highly capable in the right hands, but despite the legends around its abilities, it was already a fading star by the start of the war. The veteran pilots of the Luftwaffe were able to use their Bf-109 to devastating effect despite its issues. But as they were killed or captured, their replacement low-hour pilots became easy prey for the Spitfires, Mustangs, Lightnings, Hurricanes, Thunderbolts, prowling the skies of Europe. The Bell Arachova is one of the unique planes of World War II. The mid-mounted engine and large propeller hub cannon around which it was built made it a devastating ground attack plane, but not a very good fighter plane. Little used by the U.S. Air Force, the Air Cobra and its big brother, the King Cobra, were used heavily by the Russian Air Force to stop the tide of German armor rolling across the western stretches of Russia, able to go down in the dirt, much like an A-10 Thunderbolt. The P38 Lightning is one of the more distinctive aircrafts of World War II, called the Twin-Tailed Devil, or two planes, one pilot, by Axis pilots. The P-38 was not a twisting dogfighter, but its gun location meant it was a sniper's plane, capable of long-range attacks with a powerful punch. The large, turbo-supercharged engines let the plane fly higher than many enemies, and the weight of the big plane meant that when it started a diving attack, very few enemy planes could run away. When U.S. pilots started using differential power to produce tighter turns, the P-38 became a true thorn in the side of the enemy. With its twin-engine ability, it became one of the preeminent fighters of the Pacific, allowing it to fly long distances over water with less fear of crashing. German aircraft design often brought us some unique aircraft. The Dornier D335 was a large twin-engine plane that suffered from an identity crisis. German leaders couldn't decide if they wanted a bomber or a fighter, and this resulted in a very large aircraft that attempted to do both roles, neither very well. The EF-125 was designed to be a fast, high-altitude bomber interceptor. It was not completed before the war was over, but when compared to the Me-262, it had limited impact on future aircraft. It's certainly an interesting design concept, would likely have been very terrifying to fly, given there were no ejection seats. The Me-262 was the first operational jet fighter. It was faster than anything the Allies had, but was hamstrung by poor engine reliability and a collapsing German industrial complex. The swept wings drove future plane development as it was shown to be the better design at high speeds. The speed of the Me-262 drove new fighter tactics, and its appearance in the skies of Europe caused military planners of Allied nations to demand their own jet fighters to counter this menace. The takeoff and landing phases proved to be the most dangerous for Me-262 pilots, as Mustangs would wait for that moment to pounce. The ME-262 engines had a long spool time, meaning acceleration was greatly reduced compared to the Mustangs. And it meant they were sitting ducks during that slow flight phase. The F86 Saber roared above the Korean peninsula and danced a dance of death with the venerable MiG-15. The Saber was designed as a jet fighter using understanding gained from captured ME-262s. It was fast and agile. Though it didn't carry a cannon like the MiG-15, its 650 caliber guns were more than capable of bringing down other aircraft. When aviation historians pair off military aircraft, you get famous pairings such as Spitfire and the Bf-109, the Hellcat and the Zero. And you always see the F-86 and the MiG-15. Named as one of the best fighters of all time, tied in that location with the MiG-15, the F-86 certainly isn't perfect. But at that time, the Korean War was more than capable, and it was a flashy fighter, and helped establish air superiority over the Korean peninsula. Not to be left out, the Swedish Air Force built a homegrown jet fighter, the Saab Viggen. The Delta Wing Saab airframe and the Volvo engine made this plane one of the few Scandinavian homegrown jet aircraft of the Cold War. Designed to be operated from highways and other non-conventional locations, the Viggen was a short takeoff and landing aircraft that used its front canard design for lift generation instead of the now standard usage as a way to increase maneuverability. The Viggen was designed as a Mach 2 high altitude, Mach 1 low altitude strike plane, and is one of the few select planes that feature afterburners and thrust reversers. Famous for one movie more than anything else, the F14 Tomcat was the primary fighter of the United States Navy until the FA-18EF Super Hornet arrived on the scene. Designed around the Phoenix missile system, with radar capable of tracking and launching missiles against numerous targets up to 100 miles away, the F-14 was a standoff fighter. It was a lightweight alternative to the F-111, though it is still the heaviest carrier fighter ever. Its radar was so potent that enemies easily detected when it was on and retreated from the F-14. Still famous for Top Gun, the F-14 had limited long-term viability, and its replacement by the Super Hornet came in 2006. Designed as the next-generation replacement for European air forces, the Eurofighter Typhoon is a highly maneuverable digital fighter. Naturally aerodynamically unstable, the Typhoon needs constant computer correction to maintain flight. This instability, however, allows an extremely maneuverable aircraft. Designed primarily as a fighter, it has been modified to allow ground attack and recon missions. The Typhoon is a frontline fighter in the same vein as the F-22 Raptor, though the philosophies behind the two planes are very different, leading to slightly different flight envelope performance. The United States is hoping to replace numerous fighters with the next generation semi-stealth F-35 Lightning II. Another attempt at a multi-branch fighter, the F-35 seeks to replace many of the fighters in the U.S. inventory, including the F-16, the F-15, the A-10, and many others. It also seeks to create commonality across branches, replacing the Marine Corps Harrier jump jet and some Navy strike aircraft as well. While it is suffering from design and manufacturing setbacks, the plane still looks the part of that sleek fighter plane. Fighters have evolved a long way from World War I to the Typhoon and the F-35, but one thing has remained the same. The pilots that climb into these thoroughbreds are flying on the edge. Some say that planes are getting too simple. Today, it takes the eye of an aviation geek to pick out many of the commercial planes out there. But consider, it was only 104 years ago that man took flight. Perhaps, in another 104 years, we'll be flying something like a Type 9 shuttle. But as long as we keep innovating, we can continue to hope for the next amazing plane. In the description below, there's a link to a spreadsheet. Every plane I've featured. And a note if I like the plane and deem it a keeper or not. I hope you enjoyed this flight through aviation in this 5-part series. Until next time, keep your wings level and happy flying.